So they'll be prepared to respond to them in our next educational session, which is going to be September 21st in the same facility at 6:30. So we're not going to address specifics. We're just talking facts and overall requirements to incorporate. Okay? I think this is going in and out, isn't it?
It is.
Yes, it is.
And now the best plans, I guess. Okay, the Santan Valley Advisory Council remains neutral on incorporation, and we're providing this information as a courtesy to the members of the Santan Valley community. We also are reminding everyone to focus on the future of Santan Valley and not reflect on things that happened in prior incorporation efforts. We all know it's difficult to see where you're going if you keep your eye on the rearview mirror. If you don't know where the restrooms are, you have to go outside the building, and I swear to God, there's really a bathroom there. It's not a coffee can. It's over there in the other building. There's refreshments in the back. There's also a table in the back where you can sign up to register to vote if you're not a registered voter. If you've recently moved here, you need to re-register, so you'll have your current address. And if you need any help completing that, you can reach out to me or anyone else that says they know how to fill it out. It's pretty easy. So you can reach out to me, I'll help you with it. Okay? If I can fill it out, you guys can. All right, so without any further ado, what we're going to do is ask a series of questions of the four panelists. And again, we ask you to write your question down, and we'll pose those questions at the end of the session, just so that we give everybody an opportunity to present the information from their particular area. Okay? So first of all, Jenn, I would like you to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you represent and why we invited you here.
How did I get here? My name is Jenn, and I was an elected representative in Gilbert, so in the neighboring community, for 12 years. I ran for council in 2008, got elected in 2009, ran again in 2012 for council and got re-elected, and then ran for mayor in 2016. So I was the mayor of Gilbert from 2016 to 2020. I absolutely have a passion for local government. It won't be unclear where I stand on incorporation. I'm very supportive of the effort because I love the idea that citizens get to determine their future. And I think that local government can be a vehicle to do that. So I'm very supportive of it, but I also recognize the voice of the people, as I have many, many times and many, many experiences, both as a voter and then also as an elected member of the council. And so the people's voice is ultimately the deciding factor. You get to determine your fate, and I'm excited to see what comes of that.
Thank you. Next guest, you guys probably know Neal Carter, Mr. Barbecue.
If you see those signs on the highway that say free barbecue, it's me, so don't be afraid. The next one's October 21st. My name is Neal Carter. I am in the state legislature for District 15, which includes most of Santan Valley, all of Queen Creek, and a tiny bit of Mesa. I live in Santan Heights. Purchased my house there in 2010, so I've been in our area for a while. And I want to thank you particularly for your trust, because of course we work for you, and you, the voters, put us there. So we're trying to do good. And if you have any complaints, come speak to me after. I'm always available by phone and so on too. For the record, I neither support nor unsupport this effort. I think it makes sense for some parts of the community and it doesn't make sense for others. I know that sounds political, but that's the truth. So my house in Santan Heights, for example, it might make sense for, but I have a 4-acre parcel where the barbecue is, and maybe it doesn't because they don't have fire hydrants and things, and they're more rural. So But I agreed to come to this to explain the state law and some of the recent changes that we've managed to enact. If you guys have questions about that, so.
Thank you, Neal. Himanshu, you're up.
Hi, good evening, Himanshu Patel. I'm currently serving as Deputy County Manager for Pinal County, your current local government. I've been in that position for almost 10 years, and my background was in public administration. But prior to that, I was serving as town manager of Florence, and so I'm very familiar with this part of the county, along with the vast amount of the county, because we have to deal with so many diverse issues. And so my role here is to just share with you the county services, and should the public and the voters vote to incorporate, similar to what the residents or voters in the city of Maricopa did in 2003, how does that transition work between county services and municipal services? So I'll be happy to share with you the process and how that works. Appreciate the time, and thanks for your interest in hearing about the process.
Thanks, Himanshu. And Tom Belshe, tell us.
My name is Tom Belshe. I am the Executive Director of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. Did you want to talk about that one? Okay. Every state except for Hawaii has a municipal league, and the leagues have been formed to provide value to cities and towns in various forms. One of the things that we do is we advocate at the state legislature on behalf of cities and towns. We also do education and training with cities. We help them a lot with new laws that come into place, help them with compliance to state law. We provide a variety of services directly to them. And this is something that our governing board, which is made up of 25 mayors from across the state, this is one of the things that they feel strongly about, is that we participate in efforts for incorporation, because we too are not encouraging or discouraging any particular incorporation effort, but we believe strongly that having good information, having accurate information is important when you're making a personal decision about whether you want to incorporate.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so we're gonna jump right in on the questions here. And Neal, what needs to be done according to the law in order to incorporate a municipality as a city or town?
Thanks, Jenny. So the law as it stands today involves first a notice period. So any group that wants to incorporate has to go to the Board of Supervisors of the county and give notice. They have to wait 6 months before they begin gathering signatures. At that point, after the waiting period, they are eligible to file a map and to gather signatures within that area. They need to receive 10% of the registered voters' signatures in the area. Typically, you gather more because you want to make sure that you have the right amount. And if they get the signatures, then the Board of Supervisors certifies that there shall be a question on incorporation in the next election. So in the current instance, there's a group that has given notice, I believe, in April. And so I believe that their efforts to gather signatures will be beginning in October, I believe. And then presuming they get the required signatures, and they will need to get thousands out of that. I think they're estimating 5,000 to 10,000, given whatever size the map is. If they get the signatures, then it'll be a question on the ballot. So you have people to vote for it. And if it wins, it wins. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Now, I've been here, like I say, for almost 15 years and seen other efforts fail. They never made the ballot. So we have tried to make the process fair at the state legislature. There have been a number of changes over the last couple of years. One of the efforts that transpired several years ago, some of you may remember, was vetoed, as it were, by the town of Florence. So this was a feature of the state law. It allowed other towns to do that. Another one was interrupted by Shea Holmes, I believe, objecting to it. And so these were outside interests that weren't really members of the community in the sense that they weren't voters. So we crafted the state law. We had a series of stakeholder meetings. Of course, you have to talk to people, take their concerns. The concern was when Maricopa had incorporated in 2002 or 3, that some of the rules changed for the people creating those communities. So they thought that wasn't fair. So we said, well, okay, we'll have a period, a public period, a waiting period, which we're in now, which this is a result of. It's kind of working, right? We're able to have this town hall because we have that period. And then we'll also allow them to opt out of maps, but it's not going to kill the whole effort. So we're trying to strike a balance in the state law, I think, that we have.
Thank you, Neal. Okay, so this question is kind of up for grabs. Who would like to answer it? Who would be responsible for organizing the incorporation effort?
In state law, there isn't any direction on who organizes an incorporation effort. So most of the time, the form that it takes is volunteers who will circulate the petitions, who will actually organize and pay for somebody to. One of the things that you have to put together is a map and what's called meets and bounds. And so what that is it's a drawing of what area is covered in the incorporation, and also a textual description of roads that make up the boundary. And so again, typically the organization effort is done through volunteers and donations. There isn't any money at the state level that helps with this kind of thing. It's again, usually there's a passing of the hat, or they'll have fundraising events or that sort of thing. And then once, however, it goes through the board of supervisors and, it's on that track, it's usually done through the board of supervisors will set up the election, they pay for the election, everything is done. And that is stated in state law, but the actual organization is done through volunteer efforts.
Okay, hang on to that, Mike. All right, so the next question is, if the community would approve incorporation at the polls, what are the required services that the municipality must provide?
So state law provides that a new city or town has to provide what we usually organize under 3 headings. Number 1 is police protection, okay? For newly incorporated cities and towns, pretty much without exception, that is contracting back with the county for sheriff's service. That's why it's great that you have the county here tonight to talk about that, because they're the ones that are going to continue to provide that service for you. And that will be anywhere from 50 to 70% of a city or town budget. That's all cities and towns. That's it averages a straight average of 64%, but it's anywhere between 50 to 70 for a city or town. The next one is maintenance of the county roads inside the incorporated boundaries. Okay, now that's existing, maintained county roads within the boundaries of the incorporation. That's not new roads, that's not private roads, that's just what's being maintained by the county. And then finally, there's something that we term as administration. So what does that mean? Number 1, you're going to need to have a requirement, at least, that you're going to have an attorney. Okay, that can be a contract attorney, it doesn't have to be a full-time employee. You're going to have a town clerk. And then you have to, because you become a government, unfortunately, you get sued. And so it's very important to have insurance. Liability insurance is important. And so that's one of the things that you have to provide as well. The other is development services. So we get a lot of questions about planning and zoning and that sort of thing. Nothing will change in the beginning with your zoning map. Basically what the town will do, the city or town will adopt the comprehensive plan of the county for that area until the point that owners come in and ask for rezoning, and it's basically the same process that you see now with the county. So this is another way, roads, development services, these are services that, again, most newly incorporated communities will continue to, they'll contract with the county to complete those until such time that they can get those contracts on their own. And development services is something that usually they take over pretty quickly after incorporation. But roads and police service may be something that the county continues to do under a contract with the community for some time. The other thing that is out there is it's going to depend on what other services the community, besides those that are required, what they want to do. But those are the three that are required by state law. Now, the other question that I get a lot of times, and I'll just include it here, is fire protection. Now, nothing needs to change there, because I am pretty sure that right now you are served by some kind of fire service, whether it's a fire district or it's a private provider. That doesn't need to change at all. If it's a fire district, they're their own government. They're already collecting tax and provide the service. There's no reason to change that. Now, at some point in the future, if the community wants to change that, there is a process. But there are many cities and towns who continue to have their fire service provided by the fire districts. So that's about all the information I have. But the three requirements are police protection, road maintenance, and then that administration for the several aspects.
Okay, thank you, Tom. You want to hand it to Himanshu? We'll give you a break so you can take a couple sips of water. So Himanshu, aside from the police protection, what services can the municipality contract with the county to provide until the municipality is able to take full control of those services?
So I think Tom explained it quite well. He's beyond law enforcement, so with our sheriff, development services, including planning and building permitting, our contract services that the county can continue to provide. Road maintenance is another one. Animal care and control, that's it.
What's this up closer?
Sorry, beyond the services that Tom indicated, between law enforcement, road maintenance, the development services, those are contract services that the county will continue to provide should the new municipality want to. There are other services like animal care and control that we currently contract with municipalities to provide those services. It's important to know that there are still general services countywide, whether you're in a municipality or not, that the county provides, like public health services, library district services, environmental health related to restaurant permitting and inspection. Those are all state services that are delegated to the county that we will continue to provide, whether you're in a municipality or not. So those are your standard services that the county would continue to provide.
Thank you. So we're going to jump around a little bit, just so you guys don't think we're ignoring you. So,
Just like a candy here.
So Jenn, question number 9 on the list there. Why are cities and towns so protective of their planning areas?
Yeah, happy to take this one. So municipalities are incorporated and in a certain geographic area. So when they're talking about maps, they're talking about basically drawing an outline of where you would have your actual incorporation, the boundaries of your incorporated area. And then there's a secondary portion of that that has a planning area, so it might extend further. I'll take Belshe, share with you an example. In Scottsdale, for example, part of their planning area includes the Sonoran Mountains. Why? Because it's an asset to their community and because it provides a recreational value for their residents. So that's part of their planning area. Back in the day, you used to be able to do what was called strip annexation. It's outlawed by state law now, but Gilbert, for example, got its boundaries because the mayor in 1977, great man, he also still volunteers at the Gilbert Historical Museum on a regular basis, but he sat down with the planners of the community and they basically drew an outline of where Gilbert should be. And funny enough, they didn't want any freeways, and the 60 was a planned freeway. So you'll note that in Gilbert's boundary, there was a strip annexation that just followed Baseline Road. They look at that now as a mistake. They wish they had some freeway frontage on that side. But now we don't do strip annexation. Instead, municipalities will outline the planning area. And the reason I think municipalities are protective over that is because we're building specific services for the extension of that. So for example, when Gilbert built a wastewater treatment facility that's down on Greenfield Road, Greenfield and Queen Creek, they built that and purchased land so that they could build an initial phase and then build 2 planned expansions. So as the community grew, they would have capacity for those services for the newer growth areas. That just means it's about to rain outside. Or all of our phones will go off. So if you think about all of the investment that's made, roads, sewer systems, water lines, water rights, which is separate from the wet water, completely different pay structure or fee structure there. When you think about all the investments that municipalities make, they're making those for the long-term play, which includes their planning areas. One of my assignments still now is I sit on the Arizona Commerce Authority, which is essentially like the commerce secretary for the state. So there's a board, and we help bring economic development projects to the state. Part of our job is to oversee some of the different programs and plans there. Where you live is being looked at on a daily basis by new businesses and companies that want to come and locate. Supervisor Goodman can attest probably to the number of people that reach out to him and say, we want to build our, high-tech manufacturing plant nearby or within, nearby here. We've got to be planning ahead because most of those facilities need to be open in 12 to 36 months. So if you don't have the services or have planned to expand those services, there's no longer a possibility of actually being able to land that new employer. And that continued growth has been important to our state in a lot of ways. So I think I'll leave it there. But that tells you a little bit about why cities and towns are protective over those planning areas.
That makes sense. Thanks, Jen. Okay, if a municipality would want services that are not required, such as fire protection, how would that be funded? Who would like to answer that one? As a mayor, previous mayor?
Lots of budgets in my life. Yeah, I sat through lots of budget cycles. Gilbert actually didn't have its own fire department until the 90s. And that's when, prior to that, they contracted with Rural Metro. Rural Metro had stations within Gilbert, but as we were continuing to grow, our residents needed a higher level of service than what Rural Metro was able to provide. And so I wasn't living in the town at the time, but apparently it was a very controversial thing to start the fire department. And the voters voted actually to extend their city services to include a fire department. And when they did that, there was a tax line item that was associated with that. But the trade-off was the citizens opted to pay more for a higher level of service, and they had the ability to vote for that. We still contracted until 3 years ago for ambulance service. And the reason that Gilbert decided to take ambulance service in-house was because the response rates from our contracted provider weren't what we considered to be a Gilbert standard. And so that's constantly what you're looking at, right? Is when you're contracting with a for-profit company, they have a different bottom line, And for us, from a municipal standpoint, we just need to cover our own costs. That's the rule. So there's no extension beyond that. It's covering costs. And it's up to your local elected body to ensure that you are being responsible with the tax dollars. And it's the citizens' responsibility to hold that elected body accountable for that as well. And so there's lots, I think, of checks and balances and opportunities to do that. But I'm a proponent, again, of citizens carving their own path, which means you get to decide if a higher level of service is important to you given the phase and the life cycle of your own city.
And that's why we're so glad you're here. To be involved.
Thanks again. Yeah, my service level agreement at McDonald's is suffering horribly, so I'm gonna start going to Burger King. Their ice cream and everything, darn it. Okay, so Tom, this might be one that you could answer. According to Arizona statutes, what type of funding would the city or town receive once it incorporates from the Arizona State Shared Revenue Pool? And would these funds cover the cost of the required services?
So after the incorporation, again, the first thing that happens is a map is sent to the Census Bureau, and they provide a population estimate to the state. And what is that used for? That is used for the distribution of state shared revenues. There are 4 types of shared revenue. The most important of which are the state shared income tax, the state shared sales tax, the highway user revenue fund, and I'll explain each of these, and the vehicle license tax. Okay, so for all 91 cities and towns, they take the total incorporated population of those 91 cities and towns. They come up with a total population. Her population would be divided into that number, and that percentage of the 15% of income tax that we receive from the state would be divided amongst the cities and towns. The income tax and the sales tax are distributed exactly the same way. We get 15% of, now we get 18%, excuse me, of the income tax, and then we get 5.5%, 25.5% of the state shared sales tax. Those, again, provide a lot of the funding for cities and towns, especially smaller cities and towns. Highway User Revenue Fund is an interesting one because that is your gas tax. That's the 18 cents a gallon that you pay at the pump. That money is divided amongst cities and towns within one county. So it's kind of a complicated formula, but basically what it is, it takes into account both population of a city in respect to the total incorporated population of that county, as well as it takes into account how much gasoline is sold in your county. So the percentage of that overall amount that comes from the gas tax. So let's say, Pinal County is 10% of the total gasoline. They get 10% of that money, and then it's divided amongst the incorporated population in that county. It is the one fund that has to be used for a specific purpose, and that is for road maintenance. That has to be dedicated. It can be used for road maintenance, repair, and construction, but it is not sufficient to do construction. So all cities and towns use it for maintenance and repair. And so there is some funding provided specifically for that. The other two that I mentioned before, those are general funding. This is part of the general fund. It can be used for any government purpose. Most of that money, again, is going to go to public safety, and it's going to go to the amount of the roads that's not covered by the Highway User Revenue Fund, or HERF as we refer to it. The last one is the vehicle license tax. That's that nasty bill that you get to renew every couple of years, and you have to go and make sure your car's, clean and you have to go through the safety inspection, all those sorts of things. Again, it's kind of divided up the same way. The amount of cars that are registered in your county and the money that's received from the vehicle license tax is divided amongst the incorporated population within that county. And it depends on the number of cars, the percentage of cars registered in your county is the amount that your county gets. We provide, I should say the League of Cities has provided to the Santan Corporation effort. If you were incorporated right now, I think we've done 80,000 and 100,000, how much money that would mean. I don't have the exact figure right in front of me, but we help provide that information to the incorporation effort. So those are the funds that any incorporated community will get. For most communities, however, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear about this, for most communities, the local sales tax is much more important. Now, people will ask me, well, does that mean that we're going to have to put a local sales tax in? You may not have to right away, but I will just point this out. All 91 cities and towns in Arizona have a local sales tax. So after a certain amount of time, it will, in my estimation, because that's what we've seen with others, you will have to put one in order to keep up with growth and with other things. So that's really up to the community. If you're able to cover all the required things with the state share funds, great. Then you can keep going that way. But just experience has taught that local sales tax is important.
Thank you. This is a commercial biogas in Pinal County. Keep my money here where Supervisor Goodman and Himanshu can make good use of it. All right, so what will be done to ensure the funds collected from the HERF taxes are set aside by the county and awarded to the new municipality, or will the county continue to maintain the roads? I think we talked about that a little bit earlier.
Let me. I want to be clear about what I said. The money from HERF will go directly to the community. Okay, you will contract back with the county. Your relationship becomes different when you're a city with the county. Now you have a contract with them. You're not part of a larger CIP. You're not part of a larger infrastructure program. Now you're contracting directly with them, and you talk about the projects that you want to have. Okay. So it's a different relationship.
So that's that intergovernment agreements,
IGA,
IGA.
correct.
Some of you guys might know what those are. Okay, so will the county still be responsible for managing the elections when there is a new municipality? Like if there's a city election, do you guys manage that, or does the city take it over?
Thank you. So the state has delegated election services to the 15 counties, primarily for the federal and county and state election offices. The jurisdictional elections, like school districts, municipalities, fire districts, irrigation districts, they are the responsibility of those districts. Now, because the county, that's one of our core services, and have a permanent functionality, those jurisdictions typically IGA with the county to conduct those, or process those elections. So when municipalities are having elections, although they're elections of the city, they have IGA with the county to help facilitate that election, including the precincts to the printing of the ballots, to the tabulation of the ballots, and then providing those jurisdictions with the results And those jurisdictions are the responsible entities to canvass those elections, because it's their election. The county's only role is the federal, state, and county election to canvass those. But the jurisdictional elections are the responsibilities of those jurisdictions, like municipal.
Just one thing. Himanshu's absolutely right, but the one thing I wanted to add is that town clerks become responsible. When you first become incorporated, the council is appointed by the county, okay, until the first election can be held for council. That makes sense because you couldn't have council candidates on the same election whether you're deciding to become a city or not. So they appoint county people, and usually the process is that they will, send out requests for interest, and so resumes and letters of interest will come in, and the county board of supervisors will select the first council, and they're in place until you can have your first regular election. That first election takes place normally, the odd, so you know that there's 4 dates for state elections. City and town elections have to take place in the fall of even number of years for candidate elections. And so one of the responsibilities of the city, and the reason I talked about having to have the town clerk, one of the town clerk's main responsibilities is preparing candidate packets that can be picked up by people who are interested in running for council. So that is the role, but everything else is basically done by the county, and they're responsible for, as Himanshu said, the preparation of the ballot. I think town clerks work very closely with the election directors to make sure that all the information for the municipal election portion are correct, and that the county has all the information.
Okay, so we touched on this a little bit. Jen, would you like to expand a little on what is the process for getting additional services added? And how does a city or town justify imposing or not imposing or requesting an increased sales tax?
I think it's really ultimately up to the residents. The residents often will reach out and request and ask for a different level of service. That's one way to have municipalities increase their level of service or the variety of services that they offer. Another way is if the city or your local elected body does an analysis of when they can find those services less expensive. And I've seen that happen in a variety of municipalities. For example, trash service in most communities is contracted, and we were able to find a way where we could reduce the cost to the resident, because again, we didn't have that for-profit model. It was just what we call an enterprise fund. So it's a service that pays for itself. So that's another way. You guys have been very well represented by your county board of supervisors. I can attest to the fact I've worked with all of them, and they care deeply about what's happening. And to the point earlier about the relationship changing between the county and the municipality, we really looked, and I worked very closely with the county supervisor who covered Gilbert. In your case, in Santan Valley, you have, I think, 2 now supervisors that cover Santan Valley. So you have 2 people you can go to when you need help or when you need additional assistance. Local government provides, however you decide to set it up, 5 or 7 people to go to say, we need help. Are there any HOA presidents in the room?
Yes.
Or board members? Yes. You are the local mayors, and you get to field a lot of those things. That it is a very similar role in that space. And so if your residents come to you as an HOA president or a board member and say, we need, upgraded playground equipment, you look at your budget and you make determination as to whether you can pay for that, when you can pay for that, if it's a wise investment, and then again, how to maintain that so that you get the highest and most useful life out of that equipment. and you work directly with your county, or excuse me, your community management association, that's your city manager and your city staff. Same basic setup. Maybe you don't field quite as many calls, but it's the same basic responsibilities and same accountability to those residents. You want to make sure the services are being provided. So ultimately, you get to determine what services should be expanded and which ones shouldn't. And how do you justify the tax? I'm a big believer in show me the data, show me the numbers, and let's work through it. I was on the council in 2009 when we had to reduce our budget by 15%. Cutting $15 million from that budget. It was not an easy task. I brought together, along with our council and mayor at the time, a citizens budget committee, and we had our citizens come and help us figure out where we can all stomach cuts. And it was a great process and a community-wide effort, and we got a 7-0 vote on the budget that year, which was great. So there's ways, I think, to incorporate and include residents in every single decision that you make. So I'm a big believer in bringing together the community to help decide.
So Jen, one last question. How easy is it to get federal or state funds to help get your municipality, on the path,
I just actually sat through a presentation yesterday. I'm a member of the State Transportation Board. I don't cover your area. Your area is covered by Jenny Howard, a newly appointed State Transportation Board member. You guys are part of District 4. I cover District 1. And we just had a conversation about federal funds and how it increases the cost to do things. There was an analysis done by MAG, our Regional Planning Authority, Maricopa Association of Governments. You guys have, I think, you're not PAG, are you? Central Arizona Government Association. Those planning agencies analyze the costs of doing business when it comes to roads, streets, and planning. The analysis that was done in Maricopa County indicated that the cost to using federal funds increases the price for a project between 20 and 47%. So the cost goes up as soon as you start using federal funds. But the one caveat to that is if you have $0 to put into a road and you need a road done, and you can apply for $10 million to get the roads done by the federal government, and there is no other option, it's still worth it to pay 20% more because you need the road. I am a big believer in partnering with agencies to make that happen. For example, as a municipality, and I'm sorry I keep referring to Gilbert, but that's just my frame of reference and experience, but we needed a new interchange on the 202 at Lindsay Road. And so we worked directly with ADOT to ensure that there was dollars set aside through regional planning with a contribution from Gilbert in order to pay for the Lindsay Road interchange. And so we worked with Maricopa County, we worked with the state, and we worked with the local government in order to fund that. So there was funds coming from all different parts. That is the power of the municipality. The municipality can assemble those dollars to be able to reach a certain goal. And it can be a challenge, and that's oftentimes why you hire a consultant to help you, because they can navigate that process more efficiently. It's why you work closely with our state representatives who have the ability to appropriate dollars to different projects, and to the legislature's credit, they've done a tremendous job in allocating one-time money for projects all over the state to benefit the transportation system. Just got Prop 100 extension passed through the legislature, now it goes to the voters, but that will have a direct impact on all of you as you travel a variety of roads. And I know for a fact that Supervisor Goodman and the county is working diligently to get a Pinal Parkway type established. I think we've changed the name to that, but I don't recall what it is off the top of my head. And then also the North-South Freeway that will be a great connector for this area. You are underserved when it comes to roads, but I don't blame any electeds or even the county for that purpose, because I think everybody's done the best they can with the resources that they have, but a concerted effort with a target and goal is really, really can be driven by a municipality.
Thank you. So that kind of ends the canned questions that we had. And has anybody taken a question to Judy or Marion or anyone to ask? Okay, so we will open it up to questions of the audience, but before we do, I have one. I lay awake at night trying to think this out. So recently, when the census in 2020 was completed, it was done with a lot of constraints because of COVID. And many of us feel that Santan Valley wasn't properly, counted. And also there's been several homes or residential dwellings have been constructed. So I think our population has grown significantly since 2020. So Neal, let me ask you this.
It's not my fault.
Should the incorporation question on the ballot be approved by the voters of Santan Valley, do you think it would be wise for the newly formed municipality to conduct an interim census to ensure they are able to collect all of the funding that they need or they're entitled to by doing, an interim census? Do you think they should do an interim census? What's your opinion?
So the census, of course, is enshrined in the federal constitution. It's 1790, always on the decennial year. So the unfortunate thing is that this past 2020 was the coronavirus year. And Santan Valley, I think, is not unique in being undercounted. There's a broad sentiment. For example, is this still working? For example, the city of Eloy thinks that it was undercounted. Superior, I think, showed a loss, which is about impossible, really, given the growth of our county. A couple of the cities this past year, in the last 6 months, had sued the federal government for higher numbers. I think Phoenix was one of them. And they made a case that we were undercounted. We should have had more people counted. And they've succeeded at that. So I'm not sure that asking for a recount of the census necessarily makes sense or even is possible, but I do think that you can reach out to them and request to adjust the numbers, if that makes sense. And there was a second city too. Do you remember which one? Tom, do you remember?
There were several that we've had a number of cities that have had loss of Superior as an excellent example. Some that are very far up north. Some of our littlest communities. One community lost 25% of their population. I know that that's not possible. Okay. So I agree that going out and doing a recount, because it's very expensive. When Maricopa County especially was growing so quickly, cities and towns decided that they would go out and do mid-decade censuses. And they spent a lot of money doing that. And that, at that time, that was the only way that they could raise it. And so they were stuck. They had 5 years and then they could do it mid-decade, and then they had that new number for another 5 years, but that didn't increase. The law got changed a few years ago. And now the census does estimates after the original, census is completed. Each year, there's a census estimate that's completed. And we feel that that one is more accurate. And what's even better about that is that some cities obviously are growing faster than others. And so when those 5-year intervals would come, there'd be a huge drop off for smaller communities that aren't growing as fast as others. And so what we did now is that each year there's a change and usually an increase. to the population. So yeah, I don't think it's worth it to go out and do a new census. Looking at your opportunities, there are grievance procedures that you can go through, especially once you would become a city. It's different than an unincorporated community trying to do it. So if you were to become a city, there's some processes that you could go through to try to get that changed. Now, the one thing is that there's some regional bodies that could help with new housing information and other data that they could show, hey, this area was undercounted. Your council of government, as was mentioned, PAG, would be able to help with that. So, but it is not worth the cost. And again, the Census Bureau's resources have been greatly diminished. And so they don't do a lot of services that they used to do. And so I just think that's going to continue to be an issue. Now, hopefully, in 2030, we'll have the necessary, and I think that it really was a function of COVID. It was also a function of people being afraid to talk to census takers for a variety of reasons. So those are the things that always cause problems.
Thank you, Tom. If you guys are snowbirds and you own property here and in another state, one might want to register to vote here and stay at the other state, and then we'll get station revenue for the person that's here. Okay, are there any questions from the audience? You want to come on up here since
I think I speak loud enough. It's all right. Hey, my name is Joseph. Thank you to the 4 presenters today and giving us this knowledge to our community. Just have a couple clarifying questions. You stated that the way that the money is dispersed from the state is through about 15 or 18% of the income tax, correct? And then that is put into a pot and dispersed out between the 91 cities or something like that. So based on the information you just told about the Census Bureau and the low number of residents that's being allocated to this zone, wouldn't it be smarter for us to continue to use county money to scale up our city and then wait till we get a proper population size to incorporate? Just want, I guess, your guys' opinions on that.
I think that's an opinion. That's
a little bit of math too. She likes data, so I want to hear from you.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's 2023. That's 7 to 8 years. And there's no guarantee that your growth is going to match the growth of other cities. There's no guarantee that you're going to get a number you like.
I mean, you can see it with our eyes when we go into Phoenix and here, it is growing.
Yeah.
But Tom, does the county get it? So the county doesn't get state share.
That's right.
So I fully appreciate your argument, and it would work, but the county doesn't get it. So let me give a little bit of history on it, if you don't mind, because I'm kind of a history person, and I always think that how did we get here is useful to know. So the state we became a state, of course, in 1912, and the population centers were powerful mining towns like Prescott, Bisbee, and Globe. They were rich and powerful, and they really the state wasn't in a sense, and it was new. And they had their own taxing authorities. And so what that meant in real terms was, if you are operating, let's say, Walmart, you'd have to remit a tax form to Prescott, and a tax form to Globe, and a tax form to Phoenix, and to Florence, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which really got to be a big problem as the decades wore on. And I think it was 1971 or 72?
Actually, 1980.
It was 80, okay. So in 1980, the state decided, okay, we're stopping this. We're not doing this anymore. The state's going to collect the sales tax. It's going to be the only taxing, income tax too, I'll get to that. But the sales tax, the rates are different for the cities, but it's the Department of Revenue, Arizona Department of Revenue that collects it and acts as the collecting agent. So Walmart doesn't have to file 91 different little forms. Now there has to be a line entry for their various locations, fine, but there's one centralized authority. And then the Department of Revenue gives back to the jurisdictions according to what their rate is and what they're supposed to have. The cities didn't want to give up that authority though. And so they reached a compromise. And the legislative compromise that they reached was, okay, you're gonna give up your individual taxing departments to use the centralized Arizona one, but in exchange for that, you're going to get 15% of the state sales tax. Now, you can also institute your own municipal sales tax on top of that, which is a separate question. So you get 15% of the state sales tax as a city or a town. So Santan Valley effectively is losing out on the 15% of the state sales tax that we pay here, because the county doesn't get it, but we would get it if we were a city or town. For the income tax you mentioned, the income tax is still another legislative thing. Has anybody here lived in a city that had a city income tax? Yeah. Can you believe that there are cities with an income tax? So you file your federal one, you file a state of Arizona one, and then New York City is a good example. New York City has a city income tax, and you literally pay the city income tax, as well as the state and the federal one. So again, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, the legislature said, okay, the cities will not have that power. They cannot have city income taxes, they don't have the authority for that in Arizona. But in exchange for us taking that authority from them, we will give them 15% of the state's collections on income tax. Now, you all may be aware that this year, I guess last tax year, is the first year that our state has moved to a flat tax. I think that's a good thing. We also lowered the rate. It used to be a tiered rate that went up to 4.9 or something percent, and the legislature passed a statewide flat tax, first state in the country to do that, which is 2.5%. So I'm very proud of that. I think that's moving in the right direction, and that's great. But the cities came to us and they said, if you lower the income tax at the state level, you're not just reducing the collections that the state and the legislature gets to dole out. You're reducing our collections because we get 15% of it. So again, in order to get buy-in from all of the legislators statewide, especially rural ones that represent a number of smaller towns that really rely on this, the compromise that we reached was we're going to increase that percentage from 15% to 18%. So the cities and towns now get 18% cut of your income tax instead of 15%, because we, the legislature, just reduced your rate to 2.5%. And that's the compromise that we reached. There's a lot of confusion that surrounds this shared revenue thing. Last night, just right next door there at the county complex, they had the Green Creek Santa Valley Republican Women's Club. And I was speaking, and somebody asked about vehicle licenses and so on. The Highway User Revenue Fund, HERF, they call it for short, is comprised of money that can only be used for transportation. So the 18 cents a gallon, and by the way, that hasn't changed since the 90s. It's 1991. It's one of the lower ones. In California, I think it's 36. Yeah. So, we get complaints on it. I'm very anti-tax, don't get me wrong, but it goes only to paving, it goes only to roads. So it has to go to roads. And there are a number of compromises over that where it goes. For example, in the 70s, they had a big compromise called the Casa Grande Accords, and that decided that 50% of it will go to Pinal and Maricopa counties, and the other 50% to Greater Arizona, which includes us. So there are a number of agreements in place to make sure these things are fair. But the point is that your gasoline tax is enacted on a statewide level. So is the vehicle license fee. Now, I would argue that the vehicle license fee or tax is not to get political, I would argue it's too high. I don't pay it because I drive cars that are so old, it's like $20. but I do think it's too high. But the point is that rate is to the state legislature to adjust, and it would adjust statewide. So whether we become incorporated or don't become incorporated is moot. That your vehicle license tax is going to stay the same. So there was some confusion about that last night. When we talk about state shared revenues, it means that we will get a cut of it because of the tax for gas and the license fee or tax for vehicle license goes to HERF. has to be used for roads, but you get a cut of it. But it's not gonna affect the rate, it's not gonna go up or down, and the city council has no way of increasing your administration or your payment on that kind of thing. Just want to make sure that's clear, because there was some confusion last night about that.
So Neal, the HERF funds come back to the county, is that correct? But the other taxes don't, not exactly.
A part of them do, a part of the HERF funds do. Yeah. So it's similar to the income and the sales, right? You pay your sales tax, you pay your income tax. Those rates are set by the state and they're paid statewide. They're collected by Arizona Department of Revenue. And then in the case of the one, 15% comes back to us. In the case of the other, 18% now. It used to be 15 for both, but it's 18% now because we lowered the rate as a compromise. It comes back to us. The rest goes to the state. Right? The state funds, obviously, schools, prisons, and a number of other things. Those are the top two things, by the way, schools and prisons, and I think it's medical payments and goes on.
Thank you. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
If incorporation happens, is there any estimate on the percentage that the property taxes are going to get raised?
I don't think we're prepared to answer that. Let's write that question down.
Sorry, Jen, and then Tom. Is that okay?
There's two different property taxes for municipalities. One is a primary property tax and the other is a secondary property tax. Those are the two different types of property taxes that can exist. Many municipalities do not have a primary property tax. Gilbert doesn't have a primary property tax, Mesa doesn't have a primary property tax. Pardon me?
What is primary?
Primary is you're paying a percentage of the value of your property directly to the municipality. That would be a primary property tax. A secondary property tax is when the voters approve a project. They are voting to tax themselves to pay for a service or an amenity or something of that sort. Those secondary property tax dollars can only go to pay for voter-approved bonds. So I will give you another for example. Gilbert, last year or the year before, I wasn't actually in office, but they voted for a transportation bond. It was, I think, about $500 million transportation bond. That they voted in favor of that. That is to go, and so they are taxing themselves a secondary property tax to go to pay back voter-approved bonds. Now, who is of the mindset that taxes only go up, they don't go down? Yep, I know, it feels like that, doesn't it? When I first got on council in 2008, our secondary property tax rate was $1.25 per $100 of assessed value. That was the rate that we paid. Now, right before I left office, we moved that down to 99 cents per $100 of assessed value. Here's the caveat. The assessed value of your property has gone up. So we are collecting more money than we used to be because of the assessed values. The assessment is done by the county. So Gilbert was able to lower the rate, still pay and meet our obligations because we were collecting more money because of the assessed value. So are residents paying more? Yes. Are they paying incrementally more because of the delta and the way that they were able to structure it? Yes. I think my property tax rate went up $5.25 or something annually, not monthly, for the whole year. Went up $5.25. So again, you don't have to have a primary property tax and you don't have to have a secondary property tax. It's not a requirement of the municipality.
So, but that doesn't really help me.
Oh,
The question was, is there a way for you to determine, all right, if this happens, then we automatically have to be paying for the required services, police, admin.
Yeah,
that
and
we
there's a
talked
couple
about.
different ways to do
Correct.
that. You have to pay for the services, yes,
Okay.
there's required services,
So we're not paying for that now.
correct.
So
But you could pay,
my estimate, my big guess is they're gonna raise the property tax to cover these new expenses.
there's a couple different ways to cover those expenses. One is you heard them talk about state shared revenues, and then we'll immediately back to the municipality. And then another way would be through the sales tax and not a property tax. Property taxes are really frowned upon in our state for a variety of reasons. One is particularly we want our citizens to own their property outright, and if you owe a tax bill every year on your property, you never actually own it because the government can take it, right? So I think we actually have some of the best private property laws in the country, very robust private property laws. So it's not an assumption. I think it's an assumption, but not necessarily a reality that there would be a property tax just through incorporation. That would again be a vote of your elected body.
That's all you need to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a little more information on that, specific to the entirety of the 91 cities and towns. 44 cities and towns in Arizona have no form of property tax, whether primary or secondary. Okay, so close to half of the cities don't have one at all. It would take a vote of the members of the community, the voters in the community, to put a primary or a secondary tax in place. Okay? So, of the last 10 incorporations that have happened in the state, none of those communities have a property tax. It is not a given that there's going to be a property tax. Now, does that mean that, your property tax for the county goes away? No. The other uses of property tax for the other entities will stay the same. It's just whether or not there will be a new property tax for that city or town. And the reality is that unless the community wants to use that as a form to help pay for services, they don't have to have it.
Tom,
Yes,
can the council vote for it or just?
it's just the people. It has to go through that. It has to go.
So another thing I think that hasn't been mentioned is that your city council does not have the authority to impose a property tax. They can put it on the ballot, but the people have to vote it. So you'll need, and I got to check, because we just enacted a ballot initiative that says we need 60% now.
Does that apply to municipalities?
No, it doesn't. Okay, so it's just 50 plus one. Right? Simple majority, but it does have to do with people, not just the council, to institute a property tax or to raise it.
So, one question, Supervisor Goodman, does the city of Mesa have a property tax? They have no primary property tax.
They have a secondary property tax, but no primary.
Okay. So those are communities close to us that,
Okay, to be honest, without the pros and cons of incorporating, how can we make a decision?
Okay, so this is kind of why we're having these informational, so we can provide you the facts, because what might be a pro for you may be a con for them. So it's for you to collect all the information that you need so you can decide how it affects you.
Okay, and right now, what is the code that you gave and what's the con that you gave for us to even, you're all like, nobody wants to admit, if you're for it or not for it or whatever.
We're not giving you pros and
Right,
cons.
but what is the actual thing then? I thought by coming to this, there would be kind of a list of, these are the pros of incorporating kind of generally, and these are the cons.
So what you'll probably want to do is attend some of the meetings by the STV INC 2024 committee. We are just here to provide facts
What's
behind.
that committee?
That committee is heading up the incorporation effort currently. So you can find them on, I think they have a website, STVINC 2024.
Santan Valley.
We're happy to get pros and cons.
And on September 21st, we're going to have a panel just like this, and it's going to be members from the STVINC 2024 committee. So mark that on your calendar. And the stuff that you learned here tonight, you know, like if you wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh, why didn't I ask such and such? Bring that to that meeting, because Representative Carter probably won't be on the panel, but he usually shows up for everything. And if there's something you think of, you can always ask him. And the county, if they're not here, we can give you contact information to shoot them an email. Okay? Deb, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted the clarification on, you know, who is the absolute say in a property tax? Because it's my understanding, I've read the Arizona lease. Just for disclosure, I'm on the STV in 2024 committee. So I'm pro-incorporation. But just to be clear, my understanding is that the council can, and Tom can tell me if I'm wrong here, the city council would be able to impose a sales tax from the city and add that in there. But your property tax is basically by voter, you know, approval. So as they said, they can put it on the ballot, but you ultimately are the ones, as long as you're registered in the city, if it's incorporated, you're ultimately the one that then can, you know, decide, do I want to have a property tax for whatever the reason would be, or a secondary. And they've said they're not required, you know, so. But it is true that it's the city council that would then, they could say, we want to have a city sales tax.
That's correct.
That doesn't go to vote, that's up to the council members. And if you don't like what they're doing, then you can vote them out when it's their turn. So that's where you have your voice.
There's one other caveat to that, and that is that as a council member, you can refer even a sales tax to the ballot. You don't have to vote on that as a body. You can refer it to the ballot and have the people still vote on it. So that was something that actually happened in Gilbert in 2010. They wanted to increase the sales tax. We have Gilbert sales tax is 1.5%, and they wanted to increase it to 1.75%. If you remember, that's during the downturn where all the budgets were suffering. And so instead of voting on it as a council, we just referred it to the ballot and the voters voted it down. So we stayed at 1.5%.
Thank you. Okay, is that microphone still online?
Sure.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so if you do have specific questions about incorporation, we encourage you to come to the next meeting, which will be September 21st. And the people aren't trying to pull the wool over your eyes. They want to be 100% transparent, so you know what you are going to vote for. Okay? Are there any more questions? Yes, sir.
You were talking when you were in Gilbert, that you went from rural metro to city.
Yep.
Was that contract done between the city and rural metro, or was it still individual subscribers? And if so, how did that work?
It's changed a lot over the years. So it was a contract between the municipality and rural metro. However, this is the caveat. There are still lots of what we call county islands within Gilbert. So small parcels that didn't annex into the actual municipality. They still want fire service. And several years ago, I think it was 2009, 2007, maybe Tom, I'm sure remembers this, but all of those parcels that didn't touch each other, they weren't contiguous, got together and created a fire district. State law changed, allowed them to create a fire district. That fire district now contracts with the town because they don't pay the same taxes, right? Because they're county islands, individual county islands. Those now contract through their fire district with the town of Gilbert in order to provide. So, for example, I have a neighbor, she lives on a county island. She has a line item in her tax bill that is for the fire district. She pays that separately, and that fire district writes a check annually to the town of Gilbert to ensure that the town of Gilbert's fire truck responds. To be clear, town of Gilbert Fire would probably respond anyway, right? That's how we are neighborly, and that's what you do, and that's why you have automatic aid between neighboring municipalities. But they are paying their share of the fire service.
So when you make that contract between the municipality and the provider, how is the funds for that contract funded to the homeowners? Or from the homeowners?
That comes, if a municipality has a contract with a fire provider, that contract would be paid for through the general fund dollars of the community.
Do you mind if I speak on that? Because it's an important point for our community, I think. So right now, effectively, we don't have fire coverage really. What we do is you pay a subscription to Rural Metro. And if you pay the subscription, then you have Rural Metro, and if you don't, you don't. So if we do not incorporate, of course, that doesn't change. If we do incorporate, that still doesn't change, because like Tom said, it's not a required service. Fire isn't. Police is, and fire isn't. But if we incorporate, the city council and the city within its boundaries can decide, we want to have municipal fire coverage. And at that point, the city would assume the cost of fire coverage and the city would provide it. Now, the city can either, at that point, contract with Rural Metro to provide it as a city, and the whole boundary would have coverage paid for by the city, but provided by Rural Metro. Or it could form its own department, and then you have your sort of traditional city fire department, so it could do either. Does that help, or does that answer your question, or are you sure?
But
That's an important
money
question.
comes, that comes from the general fund if we do become municipal.
Yes.
And you guys also stated that our head count in Santan Valley isn't correct. Like
Well,
our little allocation of a fund is gonna be so small because the last census didn't count all these new homes they built. I wasn't here even 4 months ago, so my head count would be paid for it, but I'm not in the census, allocation of population. So unless another census comes through and recounts the right population, we're not gonna get the right allocation of funds from that 15% of the state general fund. They're only gonna allocate 60,000 residents worth of money, not 120 like we're at today.
Sure, so the amount of money's allocated would be different, but I would also point out, that for those people, so we met with Rural Metro, me and actually Steve, who was instrumental in your Gilbert district forming, believe it or not, who's here tonight, I don't want to call him out, but he's here. We met with Rural Metro on this very topic a couple of years ago because we were trying to figure out, right now, I'm paying, my neighbor's not, the next neighbor is, the next one is, the next one isn't, and so on. So effectively, fire coverage for the community is borne by a third or 2/3 of the people because a number of them don't pay into it. And so let's assume for a minute that I'm paying $300 for my house. I'm not, I don't remember the exact amount, it's more than that, but let's just assume that it's maybe even as $300. We talked to Rural Metro and we said, what if every single person subscribed? What if it was mandatory? Then what it would cost us? And they indicated it would be about a third less, it would be about $200. So if we contracted as a city, the cost per capita per person would be a lot less. Now, obviously, if you're not buying the service now, if you're not paying rural metro now, then obviously it's gonna be an increased cost to you because you're paying nothing now, right? But if you're like me and you are paying a subscription, you're actually gonna be paying less, even though your taxes go up. You're not gonna be spending the $300 a year to rural metro. So this is why it's hard for us to answer pros and cons. Yeah,
It sounds like rural metro gets the business no matter what.
not necessarily. There's still the option to have a municipal fire department.
That takes 10, 15 years to scale, because you guys also said that, hey, Gilbert's still using that today, and you guys switched that in 2000 and, what'd you say, 1997, and rural metro's still getting your business today.
But the rural.
Well, they don't use it anymore. They don't use it anymore. But, anyway, I hope that answers the question.
So, let me just add one more thing. The ability to provide fire service, requires, and I'm getting in the weeds a little bit, but stay with me. The ability to provide fire service requires what's called a certificate of necessity. Those certificate of necessities are coming from the state. There's a state agency that actually provides those. So even a municipality has to have a certificate of necessity in order to provide fire service. If there was more competition in the market, if you had more than rural metro just providing fire service, you're now creating obviously an ecosystem that allows there to be competition there. So part of the challenge is that a certificate of necessity covers an area and only so many providers have a certificate of necessity. And I'm not sure exactly who else has a certificate of necessity for your area, but it's probably just rural metro. And so there is no competition for that type of service. Once you have a municipality that's incorporated, all of a sudden, because a municipality is gonna go after their certificate of necessity, whether they use it or not, because we wanna make sure you have that in your back pocket in case you have to jump in and provide for your residents. So there is a little advantage, if you will, to moving that direction. And I think you've had your hand up for a long time, so
I just wanted to see if you would talk to the fact of how long Gilbert's been a town and how long it took them to get a fire department, how long Queen Creek has been a town and how long it took them. And also for the rural communities, I choose to pay or not pay. And if my house burns down, I don't have a fire hydrant, so why should I pay the same amount of money that someone who has a fire hydrant should have? Because when our area catches on fire, you know what we do? We stand there and watch it burn.
Yep.
So,
Exactly what happens.
you know, these kind of things, like everybody's worried about fire, and I get that. But it took 30 years for Queen Creek to get their fire department. It took like 50 or 60 years with Gilbert. So don't think you're gonna see all this stuff like this. It's not gonna happen. You're gonna pay a lot of money for that dog park.
You're not wrong, it takes a long time. And I think there are paths to get there faster. You are stronger when you collaborate with the county and with your neighboring municipalities. So that wastewater treatment facility that I talked about that's in Gilbert, it's a partnership between Queen Creek, Chandler, and Gilbert. So we pooled our resources together to provide that. When Queen Creek set up their fire department and their police department, they took our deputy chiefs and both put them out there. And actually, Gilbert has provided quite a bit of equipment and services that Queen Creek residents pay for. But everybody really pools together to come up with the right resources. And I do think that is another benefit, is the ability to work with neighboring municipalities. It's not that the county can't do that, it's that they're not set up to do that.
Right.
And they're not by design.
Well, I guess
doing
I'm just saying that there is a community out here that I actually believe should incorporate, but then I think there's a whole lot that needs to be.
And to be clear, I'm more worried about roads and transportation than
Yes,
fire, because
and the
fire is a
shared
one-off.
revenue, the SURF, doesn't even come close to the size of the map, doesn't even come close to even covering your maintenance. Doesn't even come close to
That's
covering your maintenance.
you're exactly right. I mean, you're not wrong about covering maintenance of highways and roads.
Which then.
We're really
usually
grateful
is
that the
gonna go to
legislature
residents.
stopped sweeping those funds
Right.
a few years ago.
I just feel like a lot of this has been very like vanillaed over, because ultimately you guys are all gonna be paying extra taxes no matter
So
what.
let me just be really clear about one other thing.
Because I've been through this process.
Oh, I'm sure, no doubt, and if you,
Mesa, Gilbert, Queen Creek, I've been through it, so you can't, you know,
I just add one more caveat, when Gilbert Incorporated, it was 1 square mile.
yes.
It was
And that's
very
the problem, they're
small
going too
amount,
big.
right? And then over time annexed, so not only did it take us 60 years to get a fire department in Gilbert, it also took, you know,
But
3
Gilbert did it right.
generations to grow our boundaries and our population to
But
what
Gilbert did it
is.
right.
So.
They're
Well,
trying to do what, 60 miles?
I don't know that we want to sort of caveat whether somebody does it right or
Well,
wrong.
no,
There's a lot of
I
paths to
lived through
success.
that one, and you don't start with 60 square miles of land.
I just want to make a quick point, if you don't mind. I live in Santan Heights, so across from us is the new community, you know, this one is between Thompson and Mountain Vista, and they're served by Queen Creek's municipal fire. And they're not in Queen Creek. So that's a third option. So I know there was some concern about the startup would be 10 years or 20 years or still further out, but that just occurred to me that although I agree with you, startup would be difficult. That is another option that you could instead contract with Queen Creek's municipal fire, which presumably has a lower, because there's no profit there, there's presumably a lower cost. I'm also glad you're here because this is the time to be vocal
Yes,
about
sir.
the map. So if your community does not want to be included, that's precisely why, it was my bill last year that got signed. It's precisely why we introduced this 6-month waiting period. No, seriously.
No,
No, seriously, I worked on the bill the first one, so you
Yeah.
came in and changed it.
And, well, the point being, this is exactly the point of this right now. We have this waiting period. They're not, the map isn't final yet. And it won't be for a little bit. And so this is the time to be vocal about whether you want to be included in it or not included in it.
yes,
And
So where is the map?
yeah, that's the one
Where's-
thing, we want to see the map.
Okay,
I
let me
mean,
say, STD Inc. has had a number of community forums. There's another.
that we're all blocked from if you don't agree
Yeah.
with them. They have blocked
Yeah.
every rural.
Jeannie Stockman
person
blocked me from this
being
even.
on- I am blocked from every Santan Valley community meeting, site,
Yeah.
everything, from the last go round. So you tell me how I'm supposed to find out my stuff when Tisha Castile and you and all of the other people that you worked with the last time around have blocked us from every site.
Well, ma'am, we're not.
I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to her. She has blocked us.
You can.
You have, Tisha Castile blocked us from every site. We have to find out through the back roads, through other people.
And you blocked me from Santan Valley Advisory.
We are
Council.
not here to talk about what happened in 2017
Yes,
or
we are, because
2018.
it affects,
Not even a month
it
ago you
affects
blocked
us
me.
now.
Excuse me.
It affects us now when
Excuse me.
we can't.
You're not in the map area. You're not in the map area. I've seen the
Well, I just
map,
wanna make darn sure.
You're
you
not in the
block
map
that
area. But the one thing you need to realize is if you were in the mapped area and you were part of a municipality, you would probably have a greater chance of getting fire hydrants put in.
I don't care about fire hydrants.
Okay, if you don't
That's not
care,
true, and that's not true.
That's
so
not
when
true.
it goes to the ballot, you have every right to vote no.
Queen Creek owns our water. Queen Creek owns our water.
I have nothing to
So
do with
you
that.
cannot sit here
Okay,
and tell
so-
us that, oh, if we get incorporated, you guys will put fire hydrants in, because you know it's a
Okay,
lie.
so if you want to attend the
If you wanna have
STD,
people be like open and learn, then you need to let opposing voices be on the center. You have blocked my husband, you have blocked her, anybody in,
Ma'am, you're taking
Tony
this
has
way
been,
out of line.
everybody that has
Please
an
stop.
opposing voice is blocked.
Please stop. You're taking this way out of line.
No, I'm
We're
not.
trying to
It
have a
affects
nice,
my
quiet
lifestyle,
meeting
and
here.
it is
Let
not
people
right
ask
to say, why
intelligent
don't you want to
questions.
be part of my
Please
community?
stop or leave.
You stop. It is
Ma'am,
not right.
Please
You come
stop
touch me,
or
you are
leave.
gonna have a problem.
You,
It is not
Out of
right to
control.
say that you want to be part of our community, but you block everybody in our community from, because they have an opposing voice. Plain and simple. Plain and
yes, sir.
simple.
okay, so this gentleman asked a good question. How do we go about seeing the map? If
Let's
you
ask,
come to our
yeah.
thing next month, right here, we'll have the map up on the screen, but the lady there will tell you where to go to see it.
You can also go to www.santanvalleyinc.com. We've got all our information on there. You can sign up for email updates. You can see the map. You can put in your address, see if you fall within the map. Also, we have a Facebook page. I'll give you one of these, and you can, get the information and everything. We're doing the best we can to get the word out. We have another, in addition to the STVAC, doing another one of these next month. We also are having a community forum on the 30th of September. It's a Saturday at Santan Heights Community Center. So that information is on both our Facebook page and on our on our website. Thank you. It's been a long day.
Thank you.
It's not
Can
right.
I make a quick comment? So, for the questions about the fire protection, fire department, rural metro, things like that, we have had, the advisory councils have, as Jeannie mentioned, this is our 5th education session. We've had 4 prior to this, and there were, I believe, at least 2 of those sessions related to fire district, fire coverage, rural metro, things like that. So you can go to our website, Santan Valley Advisory Council. We have links on there where we've recorded those education series there. There's a whole bunch of questions and answers in there. We encourage you to look in there for those. If you have any additional questions, you can contact us, and we can help get you in contact with those who can answer those questions.
Okay, are there any other questions? All right, I appreciate everybody attending, and as I said earlier, if you want to get involved with STV INC 2024, go to their website or Facebook page. I believe you can sign up to assist. We are remaining neutral. We are only here to provide information to people in the community. If you are not a registered voter, or if you've moved here recently, you probably want to go and sign up to register to vote, because the vote on whether or not we're going to incorporate relies on the people in the community to make that decision. So this is not on incorporation, it's to give you information so that when you are ready to vote, you're armed with the information you need. Okay? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Wait.
Yeah, you got it right there, guys.
I forgot about this. I was looking at the phone.
Okay.